Have you ever wondered if Jesus really existed? For centuries, this has been one of the most debated questions in history. Regardless of personal beliefs, the figure of Jesus has influenced civilizations, cultures, and religions around the world. But what do historical evidences say? In this video, we will explore documentary evidence, archaeological findings, and accounts from historians of the time that point to the existence of Jesus as a real historical figure. If you're seeking the truth beyond faith, get ready to uncover the facts that history reveals. Why is this important to you? Because understanding whether Jesus really existed is not just a religious question, but a journey to uncover the historical truth that shaped the world we know today. This video could change the way you view the past and perhaps even the present. Are you ready to challenge your beliefs and discover what history truly says about Jesus? Let's get straight to the point and unravel this mystery together. When it comes to historical figures, the importance of written records cannot be underestimated. These documents are the clues that allow us to reconstruct the past and confirm the existence of people and events. But do we have historical records that mention Jesus outside of the Bible? The answer is yes. First, let's talk about Flavius Josephus, a first-century Jewish historian. In his works, he makes a notable mention of Jesus, called Christ. This is one of the earliest historical records outside the Christian context that cites Jesus, and it is significant because Josephus had no religious interest in Jesus, which reinforces the impartiality of his testimony. Next, let's turn to Tacitus, a Roman historian who lived around 100 AD. In his work, Annals, Tacitus mentions the crucifixion of Jesus under the governance of Pontius Pilate, confirming one of the central events of Christianity from a non-Christian source. This provides strong evidence that Jesus was recognized as a real historical figure in Roman society. In addition to Josephus and Tacitus, there are other important references, such as Pliny the Younger, who wrote to Emperor Trajan about Christians, mentioning their devotion to Christ. We also have Suetonius, who refers to Christus, possibly a reference to Jesus, in a context suggesting social unrest caused by his followers. These texts show that just a few decades after his death, Jesus was already a recognized figure, mentioned in official documents. These historical sources are valuable because they were written by people who did not have a Christian bias, yet still mention Jesus. This suggests that he was not just a mythical character, but a real figure who impacted the society of his time. These records are like pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, form a clearer picture of who Jesus truly was. But what about archaeology? While we haven't found something like a document of identity for Jesus, archaeology provides us with valuable context about the environment in which he lived and the events surrounding him. These findings reinforce the authenticity of historical accounts. For example, the Pilate inscription is a significant discovery. Found in Caesarea, this inscription mentions Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who, according to the Gospels, condemned Jesus to crucifixion. This discovery confirms the existence of Pilate and reinforces the historical context in which Jesus was crucified. Another example is the Caiaphas ossuary, a funerary urn that belonged to the high priest mentioned in the Gospels as one of the main figures involved in the trial of Jesus. These findings don't directly prove the existence of Jesus, but they do confirm the reality of the characters and the context in which he lived. When we compare these archaeological findings with historical accounts, we see that they complement each other. Archaeology not only supports the historicity of the biblical narratives, but also helps us better understand the environment in which Jesus lived, his culture, and the challenges of his time. So far, we've talked about sources and evidence external to Christianity. But what about the Christian texts themselves, such as the Gospels and the letters of the New Testament? They are often viewed merely as religious documents, but they can also be considered historical evidence. The Gospels were written between 30 to 60 years after the death of Jesus, which is relatively short in historical terms. These texts not only narrate the life and teachings of Jesus, but also reflect the social and political environment of his time. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by different authors for different audiences, yet they all converge on a central narrative. the existence and impact of Jesus. The Gospels were compiled from oral and written accounts that circulated within the early Christian communities. The fact that these stories spread so quickly suggests that Jesus was a real and memorable figure, whose life had a significant impact on his followers. In addition to the Gospels, we have the letters of Paul, which are even older, written about 20 to 30 years after the death of Jesus. Paul, who started as a persecutor of Christians and later became one of their greatest advocates, wrote extensively about Jesus and his crucifixion. What is fascinating here is that Paul never met Jesus personally, but his letters make it clear that he considered Jesus a real historical figure, whose existence was widely accepted by his contemporaries. Another point to consider is how these texts were preserved and disseminated. Even amid persecutions and censorship, the writings about Jesus survived and spread rapidly. This would not have been possible if he were a purely fictional figure. The zeal with which his followers preserved and spread these texts suggests that they deeply believed in the historical reality of Jesus. Although much evidence points to the existence of Jesus, there are skeptics who question this view, suggesting that he could be more of a mythical figure than a real historical character. Some argue that the stories of Jesus have parallels with earlier mythologies, such as those of Osiris and Mithras, and that the Gospels, written decades after his death, may have been influenced by these traditions. Furthermore, skeptics highlight the absence of detailed Roman records about Jesus, questioning why such an influential figure would have left so little contemporary evidence. So what does all this mean? While the evidence is not conclusive on its own, it forms a web of indications that strengthen the thesis that Jesus was a real historical figure. The impact of his life and teaching still echoes today, but what matters for history is that the evidence points to the existence of a man named Jesus, whose life changed the course of history. These points raise interesting questions. But in the end, what do you think? Do you believe in the historical evidence of Jesus, or do you see any reason to doubt it? Leave your opinion in the comments. We want to hear your perspective, and if there's anything you'd like to add to this discussion. Now that you know the historical evidence suggesting the existence of Jesus, why not continue your journey of discovery? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming videos where we explore more mysteries and truths of history. And if you enjoyed this content, give it a like and share it with your friends.